Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to my new video. Today we're going to be talking about every Need for Speed track that is only exclusive to Need for Speed Track and never appeared in any other title, or that are completely fictional and that are not realistic at all and only available in these games. Now, just to let you know, we're going to be talking about only of the 3 games in the entire series, and all DLC tracks are going to be included because it's a small franchise overall. But as always, we're going to get started. So, start with Need for Speed Prostreet, and to be honest, Need for Speed Prostreet actually has quite a few tracks that are only exclusive to this game, both the base game and the DLC, and there's actually quite a few that we're gonna go through, and one of my favorite tracks that has only been available in this game and never returned to other racing game and either Race for Speed, and that is called Autobahnring. Now, this track, it is set in Germany, but the reason why I say this is one of my favorites is because this track is so unique, and this game does pretty well in other tracks, but one of the things I really like about this track is that you don't just have the circuit races, which are also pretty good, but my favorite thing about it is that there's a lot of these like sprint races you have in this game, and if you play this one, there are quite a few layouts, which is one thing I do like about it, and overall just very unique, and it's actually really fun. Now, I also like how it takes place in like certain biomes, like you'll be driving like freeways and stuff that actually represent Germany in my opinion, which is one thing I really like about it, and it works very well for this game because it's a pretty fast-paced game in my opinion, and it's pretty well, and it's really fun. So, and it's something you've never seen in other Need for Speed games before. Now, for the city circuit itself, it's also pretty fun because it is pretty unique in terms of like it's never been returned to any other game. Plus, it's also pretty big and it's kind of challenging, which is one thing I also really like about this track. And overall, it's just really fun, and we've never seen this overall, so it's really fun to play. So yeah. Now, the next track we'll be talking about is Nevada Highway. Now, if we're talking about the actual circuit, it's nothing special because if you actually play it, it's kind of basic in a lot of ways because it's kind of lame, and it's like a lot of the turns are like basic, and overall the background also isn't that interesting. Now, the only thing that makes it good in my opinion is that it's kind of challenging, that because of the turns are actually quite sharp and it's kind of hard. And also what makes it hard is the mountains, like the cliffs, they actually could flip your car over, which is the only good thing about it. But everything else, it's not that interesting, plus it's really hard. But I think one thing that makes it special, in my opinion, I think most of you agree here, is that there's the actual Nevada Highway like sprint, and this one is actually very hard, and it's probably one of the most difficult events in the entire game, because even though there's a lot of layouts, it is very hard because you gotta go very fast. And since the roads are really small, you gotta be very careful of where you're going, because one turn could literally total you and it could restart the race, which is really hard. And it's still fun because it does represent Nevada in a lot of ways, in terms of like the roads you drive on, in terms of like the biomes you drive. It totally represents Nevada, but still I feel like it's way too hard, and they could have made it a lot easier in my opinion. But besides that, I still do think this is actually a really fun track and very challenging one. So yeah. Now, this one is actually pretty interesting. It's called Chicago Airfield. Now, it takes place in Chicago, like it says, and it takes place in the airport, which is also pretty cool. Now, for the race itself, it's actually still pretty fun, but although there aren't any drag races or drift races, and there aren't any sprint races, this track still has a lot of fun layouts to drive through. Now, it's not the most interesting out there because there could have been a lot more interesting like layouts and like track designs in my opinion, but still, for what it is, I still do think it's a pretty fun track because it's definitely not realistic, and now it's something you'd see in real life. Plus, it's abandoned, so it's kind of interesting to see how it's like actually like that. And overall, I still do think it's pretty interesting, but I feel like it could have been a lot better, like a lot more potential in my opinion. But still, even then, it's pretty fun, and plus the red drag races are pretty fun in these tracks. So yeah. Now, this one is also interesting. The Tokyo Expressway. Now, I'm not talking about Tokyo Dockyards because this one is actually available in all of the games. But I'm actually talking about the Tokyo Expressway, which was actually released as DLC in this game. And it's only available in this game. And what sucks is that it's only been available through DLC, which kind of sucks because for what it is actually really fun. Now it's not like it's not like it's like lap based. It's also one of those sprint races, which is one thing I really liked about this game. And what makes it really interesting is that you'll be driving across the Tokyo Highway, and you'll also see a lot of like the city center in this game, which is one thing I also really like about this track. And overall, for what it is, it's definitely really cool, and it does look very beautiful in this game. From a game from 2007, it still looks very good. Now, unfortunately, I never got to play this track because it was released as DLC content, and since it's delisted, I could no longer play it, and so I had to borrow footage. So, unfortunately, I would love to play this, but unfortunately, I never did. For Need for Speed Shift 1 and 2, both of these games, since they're very similar games in content and tracks and the years it came out, they're both very similar games. So both of these games, they have very similar track amounts, and if both of these games have one track that is both available, it will count. It will be included both in the video, and I'll mention if one doesn't include in the one of those games, or if one will include both of these games. So yeah, and one of the tracks we're gonna start off is actually Ambush Canyon. Now, this track is both available in Need for Speed Shift 1 and 2, and this track is honestly really interesting because it is fictional, it doesn't exist anywhere else. But one thing I also really like about this track is since it takes place in a canyon and the top of a mountain, which is the most unique place you would see ever, I really like the views of this track because since it takes place in a canyon, it looks really unique, and it actually looks beautiful because you'll be driving on the top of the mountains, you see the views, and you also drive into the bridge, which is one thing I also really like about it. And overall, it's just really fun to race on because the track overall was just well designed, and it feels like something that could have been easily made into real life, but fortunately it was only made to this game. And for what it is, I still do think this is a very fun track, and it's super unique, and I actually really like this track. So yeah, this track is called Alpental. Now, surprisingly, this game actually made into both of the series. Now, this track is not that crazy because it's a lot smaller, and since there's only one layout, which is this one, it's actually pretty small, and it's mainly used for like smaller car classes or time trials, which obviously makes sense. Besides that, this track is nothing special, even though it has a nice forest view and it supposedly takes somewhere place in Europe, I think. This track is nothing special, and while it does have cool views and its charm, I still do think it's nothing crazy, and there's a lot other options out there that are a lot better in terms of like track's design and then even its size. So yeah. This track is called Hazyview. This is probably one of the most boring tracks of all time because even though there are two layouts, both of them are pretty boring, and since there are oval tracks, which surprisingly include a lot of those games, both of these games, this track is pretty boring, and since there's a lot of them, this is one of them that's only used probably for drift events, surprisingly. Even then, it's not fun, and the way they just did it is really boring, and I feel like there are a lot better tracks out there, even these style tracks, and overall this is probably one of the worst tracks in this game, so I would not want to see this return anywhere else. Now, this track, however, is actually pretty fun. It's called Glendale Raceway. Now, this track is both included in Shift 1 and 2. This track is also fictional, something like from Ambush Canyon, but this track is honestly pretty fun because it's even though it's on the smaller side of the size, it's still a really fun track because it plays pretty well. It has a few turns, and overall it just plays really well for certain car classes like the smaller and medium car classes. and it works pretty well for time trials as well, which is one thing I really like about this track. And overall, plays a lot of, and it's actually really fun. So overall, I do really like this track, and this track, it looks like something that you would see in the real world, but unfortunately it's only available in both of these games, which quite sucks, because if we saw this, it would be actually pretty fun, and I do enjoy it, but unfortunately never got it anywhere else. So yeah, this one we have Rustle Creek. Now this is probably one of the best oval tracks in this game for a few reasons why. It's not the best ever oval track in the entire racing game world, but in this game I think it is in both Shift 1 and 2, because one thing I do like about, even though it's small, I do really like that the roads are actually wide, so it does work well in terms of like muscle car classes and all car classes, which actually make it pretty fun. And it's actually also good again for time trials, but besides that, it's nothing special, because again, it's an oval track and there's not many layouts, which is not that great in my opinion, which I wish it did, but for what it is, it's actually not too bad. So yeah, Miyatomi is also another pretty basic track, oval track, whatever you want to call it. It's not that interesting. It's slightly better because it actually looks better, and it kind of plays a bit better, and it kind of works well for drift tracks. I don't know why, but it kind of does. But besides that, I don't think there's much interesting things about it, and I don't know why this game and Need for Speed Shift 2 decided that it would be a great idea to add so many of these oval tracks. I mean, it kind of didn't make sense because it's hard to get new tracks, but so many of these oval tracks don't honestly make sense to me. But yeah, now we have Autopoils Lakeside. Now this is another track that is quite similar to something like Glendale, but at the same time it's a lot different, because if you actually play this track, it's actually pretty cool also, not because it's the same thing, but because it actually feels different compared to the actual track, Autopoils. You might think it's an extra layout for that track, but in reality what it is, it's an entirely different track with made it from scratch. And overall, I still do think it's pretty fun, and it does take place in the lakeside, which obviously makes sense like the title says. And overall, I still do think this track actually plays pretty well, and drifting and racing, which is actually pretty fun. And again, one thing that always made this game, and it's kind of weird in Shift 1 particularly, and it's that a lot of these tracks in Shift 1, they were meant for smaller car classes, which obviously makes sense. Which one thing I wish a lot of these tracks would do is, I wish they would make it like for all car classes, but they usually made it for like beginner, which is not a bad idea because a lot of these tracks are challenging, but still I wish they would make it more like challenging. But even then, I still do think this is a pretty fun track. So yeah, this track is called Tokyo Dockyards. Now this track is actually pretty cool, and it's also really unique because it's not just set in Need for Speed Shift 1 and 2, but it's also set in Need for Speed Prostreet. Now this track, and it's also like Tokyo representation, is actually works pretty well, because even though you'll be driving on the Dockyards, which is honestly pretty fun, you'll be also driving on some freeways that are set in Tokyo, which is honestly pretty cool. And one thing I also do like about this track is that you, on the backgrounds, you could see the Tokyo buildings, and overall it's just very unique, and it honestly works so well for something like this, because it works well for racing, it works well for drifting and time trials, and plus it works very well for all car classes, which is one thing I really like about this track, which is not something that a lot of tracks do pretty well, but this track does very well. And overall, since it's set in the most popular city in the entire world, it works pretty well, and it's also really different to compare other Tokyo circuits out there, and this one is probably also one of my favorites because it's very fun. So yeah, now we have Riveria. It's set somewhere in Monaco, and it's trying to clearly inspire Monaco circuit, but it's clearly different because if you actually play this track, it clearly has a different layout. Even though a few of the roads do actually have the actual base track, the rest of the track is actually takes place in different roads and routes, which is one thing I do like, and that is why it's only available in this game, and it's in the base games, it's only available for Need for Speed Shift 2, but it was also released as DLC in the first Need for Speed Shift game. Now, I never got to play the DLC version of this track in Need for Speed Shift 1, so I only got to play in this game, the second one. But in my opinion, it does actually work pretty well because it's clearly inspired it, but it's not something like same. And plus, since you don't even have it in another game, it's clearly like something its own. But I do feel like it's pretty fun because it is extremely similar to it. I do feel like it actually plays pretty differently, and for what it is, actually pretty fun. So in my opinion, I still do enjoy this track. So yeah. So here we have Dakota Raceway. Now this track is actually pretty cool, and I actually do like it because it works pretty well compared to all other oval tracks in my opinion. Now the way this oval track works is there's a one layout that has like the basic one, but one thing I also really like about it, since there's a lot of like layouts that have a lot of different turns, I actually really like that because many oval tracks don't do that and it doesn't work very well. But this track, it does pretty well, and overall it does work somehow better than most of these oval tracks do. Now it does work best for, I'd say, like muscle cars, smaller and medium car classes, and it doesn't work too well for higher car classes, but I still do think it's actually pretty fun, and the way they approach it in this game is actually pretty cool, and it's both including for Speed Shift 1 and 2. So yeah, I actually do enjoy this track, and for what it is, it's actually quite cool. So the next track we have is called London Raceway. Now this track is honestly pretty fun, and how they did it in this game and how they approached it was actually really good in my opinion. Here's why. Now you might be thinking, well, this track already exists in other games because London is a very famous location in many games. Now you might think that, and in some cases yes, but those tracks are completely different layouts, and this one in particular is a lot different because you'll be driving throughout the bridge and you'll be driving like the downtown area of the city, and overall it's actually pretty fun because it works well for many car classes. And I feel like city circuits, in my opinion, I just enjoy them overall more just because they're a lot more unique and a lot less something that you see overall. And another thing that was pretty interesting about this track is that in Need for Speed Shift 2, they added a lot more layouts to this track, which in my opinion is honestly pretty cool, and it would made it better for certain car classes that are pretty slower or that are faster. So that is one thing I do like about it, and there's a lot more variety in terms of the city, and the track overall just works very well. So yeah. Next we have Shanghai. Now this track is honestly also another pretty fun track, but another thing that I want to say here is that this track, and moving on forward, these tracks are only available in Need for Speed Shift 2 and not the first entry. So for this game you do have a lot more tracks, and the way Shanghai works is honestly pretty cool because it's another location you would never really see in other games because it's one of those countries that is kind of niche in terms of gaming. But the way this track plays is honestly pretty cool, and one thing I also do like about it, like the London track, there's also a lot of layouts, and so it means certain classes could pick the smaller or the bigger one, which works well and means there's more routes throughout the city circuit. But this track, it's mainly like forward, you just drive straight, but it does have a few turns, and some parts of the track are quite challenging because you gotta go up and down, makes your comp jump, so and it could be pretty hard, but the way it plays overall is just really good. So yeah. Next we have Miami. Now this track is also pretty fun, and it's also another exclusive to Need for Speed Shift 2. Now you might be thinking, well, what about you're talking about the Miami Raceway, the one that is used in real life, like Formula 1. No, this one is completely different because that track is like its own raceway, and this one, it's like literally takes place in the city center. Now this one is also pretty cool because it's not somewhere you would see a city circuit, but the way it works is honestly pretty well. Also, that's also good because there's a lot of layouts and there's a lot like that takes place in the freeway, and there's a lot of turns, and overall the city, it looks awesome if you drive on this. And the way they just made it in this game is very good, and sure, in some ways it could have been better, but even then I still do feel like this is a pretty good track, and for what it is, I still do enjoy this track. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, and it's only available in this game, Shift 2, and it's not really like a track, but more like environments, I would assume. And in this game, they added a bunch of these DLC tracks that are basically like dragways, and basically they're like its own thing, I would say, but they're just basically drag strips. Now it's pretty fun because I got to play it like on PC and stuff, but on console I don't have it, so I can't record this footage. But if you do play it, I still do think it's pretty fun, and it takes place in certain environments that are not available in the base game tracks. And overall, just how this game worked is very good. So that is it for the list. Alright guys, that is gonna be it for the list. There's a lot. We're going through the Need for Speed tracks. They're only available in every Need for Speed. It's been a good list, and I do enjoy making these videos, so yeah. Let me know if you guys want me to do more videos like this, and if other franchises like Grid or Gran Turismo or something like this, just let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if I should do other things like this. Let me know in the videos what you think about this video in the comments down below. But as always, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Until next time, peace out guys.